Back there in our relic case, our reliquary as it's called, there are a lot of sacred portions of the bodies of some saints in the church. It's actually amazing how vast our collection is. Out of all of them, the one that blew me away the most was that there's a relic of St. Augustine there. St. Augustine, pillar in the church, legend. 1,600 years ago he lived. It's amazing to me that we have that right here in Glens Falls. He's somebody that a lot of us really appreciate, not only because he was so wise and wrote and said so many things that are helping us on our faith journey today, but also because he wasn't always a saint. Some of us are amused, actually, by how much he was not always a saint. He chased women. He pursued the finer things in life as a top priority. And he wanted, above all else, to be sophisticated. He was the one who famously said, "Lord, make me chaste, but not yet." His job was a professor of rhetoric and debate. And you can imagine that in those Roman times, that was a very lofty position to have. He was told by one of his mentors that he had a lot to give and he should try to figure out what God was asking of him in his life. And Augustine was a seeker. He really wanted to get to the truth of things. And so he wanted to know more about what God wanted from him. So his mentor told him, read the Bible and see how it applies to your life. But Augustine started reading and was so unimpressed with the Bible. He said, I teach the classics. I teach Virgil and Cicero. And he said, this Bible is so boring and repetitive. It has a horrible vocabulary. The stories half the time go nowhere. He felt that it wasn't impressive at all. He was a bit too sophisticated for that. Being sophisticated is a good thing, generally speaking. It's kind of good for us to want to reach to become our fullest potential, but it can also limit us. If the thing we tell ourselves is, I'm sophisticated, then we can never enter a pie-eating contest. And we can never sing karaoke. And we can never get into bumper cars with kids. We're too refined for that, we think. I can't do that. I need to pursue the higher things in life. The Greek root for sophisticated comes from the same word as sophomore, and also Sophia, the name for Lady Wisdom in the scriptures. So the word is related directly to wisdom. But there's a reason why we have two words for those things. In fact, in the 1800s, the word sophisticated was seen very differently than we see it today. It meant a kind of twisted wisdom. It wasn't always a compliment to be sophisticated. It made you sound a bit like a shady character. And I think the word twisted is interesting because I think sometimes a pursuit of sophistication can get us a little twisted. You know, we start thinking we're too sophisticated for the Bible, things like that. I think all of us know people who are well-educated and articulate and really bright and are also wise. But probably all of us also know people who have terrible grammar and maybe never finished school and are as wise or wiser than those other people. Sometimes the truly wisest people are the farthest thing imaginable from sophisticated. In my former parish, there was a woman named Mary who was very down to earth and sometimes even a little salty. But everybody recognized that she was a holy woman. One day she told me, "You know, Father, years ago, I stopped buying face cream." She goes, "I know my face is filled with wrinkles." She said, "But I realized one day that you can't serve God with your face." She goes, "How are you going to serve God with your face? God doesn't need to be served with your face." She said, "God wants you to go out there and help people." So she said, "I don't buy face cream anymore. I buy foot cream." You know, one survey of American Catholics that kind of got a lot of publicity the past few years asked Catholics about their belief about the Eucharist, and it said that up to 70% of us don't really believe that it's Christ. And that a lot of people think it's a beautiful symbol, but believing that it's Christ is a step too far for them. And maybe that's because it feels a bit like, oh, that's kind of superstitious, isn't it? Or kind of magical thinking. It sounds like something that, simple people would believe. I would imagine that many people who consider themselves sophisticated answered that way about the Eucharist. Oh no, not the real body and blood, but a symbol, sure. But if we're sophisticated, we may feel that that's just too medieval for us to believe. And that sometimes happens when people encounter faith topics. It recently happened at the opening ceremony of the Olympics in Paris, when they created that tableau of the Last Supper. And everybody said, "That is ridiculous. What an awful thing to do," they said. And the people who created it said, "Oh, don't you get it? Maybe you're not sophisticated enough to understand." And people said, "It's not about that. It's terrible taste." Nobody who had true wisdom would do something like that. So, interestingly, we can see in some circumstances a real difference between sophistication and wisdom. And when it comes to belief in the Eucharist, we know that that's a matter of faith. There's many intelligent people who don't believe in the Eucharist, and there's many intelligent people who do. But it's not about intelligence. It's about faith. This week, as you know, we're returning to distributing the blood of Christ at all the Masses. And I don't know if this is true, but it may be that if you came with someone today, you had a conversation about that in the car or at some point, like, "Are you going to get the wine at Mass today?" And someone might respond, "Oh, no, I never get the wine." And I think it would be interesting for us to just pause and say, why did I say wine? Why did I choose the word wine instead of the blood of Christ? Sometimes that's a big debate in families, Do you receive the blood of Christ or don't you? I have a friend whose sister is an RN and whose mother is a retired RN, registered nurse. And they were talking about this one day, and the nurses said, "Oh no, I never take the blood of Christ. I know too much about germs and viruses to take a sip of a common cup." And my friend said, "I don't believe that there's any way to get sick from the blood of Christ." She said, "Just deep down in my bones, I don't believe that. I believe that I will not get sick from the blood of Christ." And her belief in that is not based on intelligence, because she's as smart as they are. She's an administrator of a big public school in an urban area. She's got multiple master's degrees. It's not a matter of intelligence. It's a matter of faith. So this week, we're being given an opportunity to ask ourselves, is there somewhere in my life where I've become a bit too sophisticated? Am I maybe a little bit dismissive of something that seems maybe quaint or old-fashioned or peasant-y that actually I need to take a second look at? For a lot of us, it's good to stretch to become the best version of ourselves, to try to become sophisticated in that way. But is there a chance that we've gone too far and we're seeking to look refined in the minds of others instead of in our relationship with God? What is your reaction to the blood of Christ returning at Mass this weekend? You know, it's important to say here and now that there's no obligation to receive the Eucharist under both forms. The power of the Eucharist is in every molecule. So if you receive a tiny crumb or a tiny drop of either form, you're getting all of Christ. But is there a feeling that you have about the cup that surprises you a bit? Is it something that's worth pondering? Especially when Jesus says things today that are just so clear, so unmistakable. He says, "My flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me, and I in them." When one of my parishioners in my last parish turned 100, we all celebrated with her. She was a wisdom figure for all of us, Mary Carnabucci. She was born the same year that the church was built, and so we just saw her as such a pillar in the community. When she turned 100, I asked her, "What's your best advice for living a good long life?" And she said, "Oh, Father, I gave up giving advice a long time ago." She said, "When you get old, people ask you for advice." She said, "But what do I know?" She said, "I tell people who come to me, go to God. God's got the answers you're looking for. Don't come to me. Go to the master of it all. Go to God." And I thought, what a wise lady. True sophistication.